Welcome to Quantifying Technologies, home of the Digital Executive Podcast. Do you work in emerging tech, working on something innovative, maybe an entrepreneur? Apply to be a guest at www.coruzant.com/brand. Welcome to the Digital Executive. Today's guest is Yakir Golan. Yakir Golan is the CEO and co-founder of Kovrr, a global leader in cyber and AI risk quantification. He began his career in the Israeli intelligence forces and later gained multidisciplinary experience in software and hardware design, development, and product management. Drawing on that background, he now works closely with CISOs, chief data officers, and other business leaders to strengthen how organizations understand and manage both cyber and AI risk at the enterprise level. Yakir holds a bachelor's in electrical engineering from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology and an MBA from IE Business School in Madrid. Well, good afternoon, Yakir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I appreciate it, my friend. And I know you're hailing out of Israel right now. I'm in Kansas City, so we've got about 8 hours between us, but I appreciate you making the time to do this. Yakir, let's jump into your first question. You began your career in the Israeli intelligence forces and then moved into software and hardware and product roles before founding Kovrr. How did that background shape your thinking about risk systems and what enterprise organizations truly need when it comes to cyber and AI exposure?
Yeah, that experience in the intelligence forces really shaped how I think about risk and systems. You're trying to look at how small signals connect to larger patterns and how one detail on its own might not mean much, but together they all can tell a story. That perspective has stayed with me and guided me. It's the same way I see cyber and AI risk today. Dynamic, interconnected, and constantly evolving, of course. You can't look at any single event in isolation. You have to understand how it fits into the broader ecosystem. During that time, I also saw how much valuable data exists in the hidden layers of the internet, what's called, particularly on the dark web, and how little of it was actually reaching the organizations being targeted. That gap between available intelligence and accessible insight here really stuck with me. And when I moved into software and hardware later in my product roles, I became focused on how to bridge that divide, how to take raw, fast-changing data and turn it into structured models that could simulate real-world behavior and quantify exposure. Whether that means modeling a cyber incident or AI system failure, the goal was to make something abstract and measurable. Over time, I noticed another gap emerging in enterprises, which security team had a lot of technical data, but leadership were struggling. They didn't have a clear way to translate into a business context to understand what an exploited vulnerability or a flawed AI model might actually mean financially, operationally, business-wise. And most risk management approaches were still very much static, built on assumptions rather than real intelligence and data. And I want to bring that discipline of continuous data collection, modeling, and validation that I learned early on into enterprise risk management. And that idea became the foundation actually to Kovrr when we started. And from the start, our goal has been to democratize access to real-time risk intelligence and apply it to cyber first and now to AI exposure. And we wanted to give organizations the same level of situational awareness and quantifiable insights that intelligence agencies rely on, but also in a way that's practical for business leaders. And that's the driving force of Kovrr, helping enterprises manage cyber and AI risk proactively with evidence and clarity instead of reacting to the after effect.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I think it's important. Both of us served in the military, and I think it served us well. We learned a lot. And I took away that your learning perspective from your military experience really made a big impact. And you took that with you when you went into the civilian world.
Indeed.
I like the goal here. You were trying to make everything measurable and all the work you were doing with that continuous data collection while always looking at ways to lower that risk, the cyber risk, the AI risk. And I think that's important. So thank you for sharing. And Yakir, Kovrr recently launched AI risk assessment and AI risk quantification module, which gives organizations a way to model potential loss and build visibility around AI risk. Why do you believe moving from qualitative risk claims or concerned about AI risk to quantified metrics is a game changer? And what are the biggest barriers organizations face in making that transition?
Yeah, so when you quantify risk, it stops feeling abstract. Suddenly it turns into numbers people can talk about, engineers can talk about it, GRC, people, leaders can talk about it, the board can discuss and talk about. We all see the same picture and we can make decisions without guesswork or subjectivity. Numbers give everyone a shared language. And then AI risk moves from theory to something you can measure, compare, and act upon. You can rank exposure, you can see which controls are actually moving the needle and direct budget to the places with the highest return. That shared language addresses the real problem because for years, risk conversations lived in subjective scoring. Red, yellow, green, high, medium, low. Each team had a different definition, which made alignment tough and basically slow decisions, which is the toughest outcome. Quantification flips that. It connects cyber and AI exposure to financial operational outcomes the same way you evaluate any other business risk. It creates one language across security, GRC, finance, and the leadership of the organization. So why isn't everyone doing it today? Well, first, it feels new. AI risk today reminds me of cyber a couple of decades ago. People sense it matters, but it still sounds niche or academic. Meanwhile, the reality is that AI is already added through day-to-day operations, which means the stakes are real. And second, adoption is outpacing governance. Teams are ruling out Gen AI features and pilots quickly. Policies, controls, and oversight are still catching up. And in that environment, the starting point can feel fuzzy, even overwhelming. Well, and the good news I have to say is you do not need to start from zero. You can use the same governance playbook that works in cyber, begin with a structured control assessment to establish visibility. And with AI, that typically means using the NIST AI RMF or the ISO 42001 frameworks. And from there, you build progressively, track maturity over time, identify gaps and owners, add quantification as your data and intelligence advance, and treat this as iterative practice rather than one-time project. When organizations take that path, two things happen fast. One, alignment improves because everyone is looking at the same measures. And two, investment decisions get better because you can show which action reduce expected loss. And this is how AI risk moves from a theoretical worry to a managed business issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just highlight a couple things that I thought were important. Obviously, quantifying risk takes the abstract out of the conversation. Everybody can understand, and ultimately you're lowering risk. It also creates that correlation with quantification, the correlation between cyber AI risk to the financial aspect of the business. And I think that's really important. Yakir, Kovrr's quantitative models account for rare high-impact events and incident types across AI vectors. What are some of the tail risks in AI that you believe are underappreciated today? And what should enterprises begin modeling now to avoid surprises in the future?
When we talk about tail risks in AI, we're really talking about those rare high-impact events that can cause outsized damage. Things like large-scale model manipulation, data poisoning in training sets, or even a systematic outage tied to a major AI service provider. But honestly, what matters most isn't identifying every possible scenario. It's how you start modeling them. A lot of organizations assume they need massive data sets or advanced analytics to quantify a risk, but that's not true. You can start small. You begin with one or two clear high-priority scenarios that everyone can understand. Technical and not technical stakeholders alike. Maybe it's an AI model that fails in a critical business process. Maybe it's a third-party AI tool that accidentally exposes customer data. The goal isn't to capture everything at once. It's to build the first directional view, sometimes tangible enough to begin shaping mitigation plans, funding conversation, and risk strategy. Once that foundation is there, you can start layering more granular metrics like average annual loss per scenario, high severity probabilities, downtime duration, and even the financial impact of a bias or misinformation-driven outputs. And over time, that evolving picture helps organizations understand not just what could go wrong, but how much risk they are willing to tolerate. That's also the point where risk appetite becomes measurable. Boards can start setting thresholds, for example, deciding that the no AI-related event with more than 5% chance of exceeding a $5 million loss should be accepted. That kind of clarity isn't possible without quantification. It shifts AI governance from being purely policy-based to being performance-based, where you can actually measure how resilient you are. And just like with cyber, it's not a one-time exercise. It's iterative. Each modeling cycle builds confidence, improves accuracy, and then helps leaders stay ahead of those high-impact AI events instead of being surprised by them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And your quantitative model obviously helps senior leadership and boards understand and prepare for these risks. You mentioned a few of them. Obviously, there's data poisoning, there's outages, downtimes. But what this does is it helps prepare for that mitigation planning, maybe budget, downtime planning, that sort of thing. And I think that's important that people are ahead of the game because this stuff is inevitable. And Yakir, the last question of the day, if you're looking ahead 5 or 10 years, how do you envision the role of AI risk quantification evolving? With regulation like in Europe, the EU AI Act, new business models and more automation across operations, what will good risk management look like in the future, and how will Kovrr's vision support it?
We've actually seen this evolving before with cyber. So in the early days, risk quantification was what finally bridged the communication gap between technical teams, executives, and regulators. It gave everyone a common language. Now the same transformation is starting to happen with AI. Boards, investors, and regulators are no longer satisfied with qualitative statements like we're monitoring AI risk. They want measurable evidence and clear demonstration of exposure controls and the potential financial impact. Regulatory pressure is accelerating this shift. The EU AI Act makes senior management explicitly responsible for AI oversight. That level of accountability means leaders have to understand risk in measurable, defensible terms, and that's exactly what quantification provides. In the US, for example, the SEC cyber disclosure rules already set the precedent for defining and reporting material risk. The same principle is coming to AI. Companies will soon have to quantify what constitutes a material AI event and show how they're mitigating it. And in Europe, the European Central Bank is taking this even further. Banks are now being asked to model how major disruptions, like geopolitical shocks, cyber incidents, systemic failures, would affect their capital reserves. That's financial risk modeling becoming regulatory expectation, not an optional exercise. It's only a matter of time before AI-related scenarios are part of that list. So what does that mean for the future of AI risk management? In my perspective, the direction is clear. Quantification will move from a best practice to a regulatory investor expectation. 5 and 10 years from now, good AI risk management will mean being able to answer 3 questions clearly. What are our AI-related exposures? How much could they cost under realistic scenarios? And what action most effectively reduce the exposure within our defined risk appetite? And that's where Kovrr's vision fits in. Our focus has always been on bringing financial discipline to technology risk. Just as we did with cyber, we're building the models that let organizations express AI exposure in business and capital terms. The goal is simple: to give leadership a quantified view that supports regulatory readiness, investors' transparency, and operational resilience. So AI becomes, a managed source of value, not a source of uncertainty and unpredictable loss.
Thank you. I appreciate you unpacking that for us. Absolutely, leaders, boards, investors are wanting this quantitative level of data so that it is measurable. And how do we mitigate future AI risks? Financial risk monitoring is now a requirement, as you mentioned, and it's so important. And when you, again, quantify things and speak a shared language and tie that correlation between the risk to the financials in the organization, people certainly pay attention. So I appreciate that. And Yakir, it was such a pleasure having you on today, and I look forward to speaking with you real soon.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure participating, and I'm looking forward to keep listening to the next series.
Bye for now.